Good evening and welcome to Greater Somerville for April 12, 2011. I'm Joe Lynch. My guests tonight are Kimberly Smith-Cofield and Dennis Fischman. They are from the Community Action Agency of Somerville, or better known as CAS. Kimberly Smith-Cofield is the executive director of the 30-year-old agency, and Dennis Fischman is the planning director. The Community Action Agency of Somerville is dedicated to ending poverty in Somerville and to assist those in need, with the ultimate goal of helping those to become economically self-sufficient. Welcome to both of you to Greater Somerville.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I was teasing Dennis before we went live. I said, wow, what a commute you had coming over here tonight, huh? CAS is located right here in Union Square. Mm-hmm. Lovely downtown Union Square.
Yes, our administrative offices are here, and our Head Start program administrative offices.
Both, yep,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Well, you're no stranger to Union Square, but it's your first appearance here on Greater Somerville. Mm-hmm. So I clued you in. I have two public service announcements. As always, Somerville. The first one is the Patriots' Day celebration is coming up this Monday, and many of you know that Paul Revere makes his annual ride through Somerville and Medford on the way to Concord and Lexington. So the celebration again this year is at Foss Park, beautiful Foss Park. Foss Park Neighborhood Association, all the folks from City Hall will be participating, so make it a point to go down. Watch the local paper this week for the time of the celebration. Also coming up on Monday is the Boston Marathon, and I'd be in trouble with some family and friends who are running this year if I didn't say best wishes and come in under 5 hours. So there you go. I made my two public service announcements.
Very good.
We were talking before the show that agencies such as CAS are now feeling the burden of the downturn in the economy. So before we start, Kimberly, I'm going to start with you. If you can just describe a little bit about the mission of CAS, and then we'll walk through, some of the programs, the specific programs that you offer to not only Somerville, but you've taken over a little part of, with the Head Start program, into the city of Cambridge.
Sure. Definitely, the Community Action Agency of Somerville mission is, as we say, to working to end poverty where we live in this local community, as well as to mitigate some of the contributing factors to being impoverished. And so there's a twofold piece to the mission, and all of our services and programs that are in place are to directly address that. So any of our services that have to do with housing or with child care and legal activities, all are to reach that mission and goal.
Mm-hmm. Terrific. Mm-hmm. And the Head Start program is specifically aimed at children in the educational system.
Right. Yeah. Well, preschool children, of which we have about 355 children at any given time and their families. And, what's really important for people to understand is that that particular program addresses not only the child that's specifically in the seat in the child room, daycare room rather, but also the father's participation, whether there's domestic violence issues, substance abuse issue, healthcare, nutrition, a bunch of things that are provided as wraparound services for that family of that child. Mm-hmm. So,
Dennis, you've been with the agency for quite a while.
7+ years now.
Yeah.
There are people who are much longer there than I am. But.
Yeah, but I'm very familiar with your name as part of the planning director for the agency. Mm-hmm. And the question that somebody asked me, I send out the email blast to let them know who's going to be on the show. The question that they asked me is how much has Somerville changed in terms of the needs? We're being viewed as this city going through a renaissance. Yeah. And, the words gentrification has slowly seeped into our vocabulary here. Mm-hmm. So from 7 to 10 years ago to today, is there more of a need today than ever for an agency like CAS?
I think I would say that because there are still a great number of families living in poverty. About 1 out of 8 families in Somerville lives in poverty. And because they're competing in this very expensive housing market with families that are not only out of poverty but fairly wealthy, life has become harder for them. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. one of the things people sometimes don't realize is when we talk about the federal poverty level, what does that mean?
Right.
If you're, say, a typical family of 4 living in Somerville, or anywhere in the continental United States, the federal government thinks you're out of poverty if you have more than about $22,500. Now, we know that you could spend $22,500 on rent in Somerville. An organization in Boston, the Christian and Women's Union, calculates a different number, which they call the Family Economic Self-Sufficiency number. In other words, what does it take, really, for a family living here to pay their rent, buy their food, pay for their utilities, their transportation to work, their child care? You know, we're not talking about frills, just the basics. They look at that same family, you know, 2 parents, a school-age child, an elementary school-age child, and they think that family needs more than $60,000. And
that's the bare minimum.
And that's
not 2
Definitely.
trips a year to Disney.
No.
That's not the
without
college fund.
Right.
That's not the
Right.
rainy day fund if one of your incomes disappears when somebody's sick or thrown out of work. That's just living from week to week.
Let's go back to it just for a minute, Dennis. Let me get this straight in my head, that the federal government says, on average, for a typical family of 4 living in Somerville, if you make $25,000 a year, you're not below the poverty level.
Exactly.
That's
It's
insanity.
very scary,
That
very
is
scary.
insanity. I'm not going to comment on how the federal government does it. They got enough problems during the budget season. But let's move on a little bit to Cass and some of the types of things. Now that you've got the picture, folks, that, you know, the federal government has a funny way of looking at things, that there are folks here in Somerville, 1 out of 8 families, are below that level. They're below that poverty level, and they're struggling. And as everybody knows, we've done a couple of shows on, you know, the financial crisis here and how it affects Somerville. We hear the mayor, we hear the Board of Aldermen talk about funding that's being cut to the municipalities for providing basic services. You folks are also fearful this year that during when the federal government starts wading through this budget, and there seems to be a bunch of folks on Capitol Hill with samurai swords just wanting to
Definitely.
cut all these agencies because they really may not affect their constituents all that much. I'm not saying they're
For the ones
callous.
that vote.
For the ones that vote.
Yeah.
It always comes down to that, though, doesn't it,
Exactly.
Kimberly?
Exactly, and that's the problem. We really need the very people who are receiving these services to be the voice that's heard the loudest.
Let your
because-
voting do the talking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they will go to the people who are doing the voting and voted them into position.
Yep.
But we know that the community action agencies as a whole across the nation, including in Somerville, offer very unique services that many of, I think, those in our legislators do not appreciate. You know, part of our role in the community is to bring organizations together so that we can leverage other kinds of services for the very individuals and families that are in need. So the CSBG, or Community Services Block Grant money that we're in fear of losing in this upcoming year, is the money that actually affords us to do and provide some services, but also allows us to make that a bigger pie for Somerville by bringing on other kinds of services like GED programs and the Somerville Community Corporation with their affordable housing. There's a myriad of things. We partner with over 60 other agencies to make sure that there's a one-stop kind of provision of services to individuals and families.
Now, is that the basis? Let's go back to the funding. Is that one big grant the basis of everything that you do throughout the year?
Yes,
It is the base level of funding. Head Start has its own funding stream, but for the agency to run, that is the money that pays to keep the lights on, you know, to keep the doors open, the telephone. It pays for a lot of the advocacy and community services. It might be helpful, Joe, if we just mention some of the services
Be
that
my
we
guest,
have.
yeah.
We've already talked about Head Start, which was one of the earliest programs at Cass. Cass started in 1981. This is its 30th anniversary year. Head Start became a part of Cass in 1982, and it's been so successful that, as you mentioned, when the opportunity arose to provide Head Start services in Cambridge as well, we bid for and won that contract. So that is the two-city part of our program. Over the years, Cass also, people over in West Somerville at the Clarendon Hill Towers will remember, when that building had been kept at below market rates because the federal government had subsidized its building, but the low-income use of it was expiring. The time was up. It was going to go up to market rates. Cass, and this was before either of us were here, this was when Executive Director Jack Hamilton was in charge.
Yep.
Cass sent in community organizers for several years running, and the end result was that the tenants at the Clarendon Hill Towers now own that set of buildings.
Yeah.
Their tenant association owns it and hires a management company, and everybody who rents there can rent at an affordable rate.
Yep.
One other thing in the history that I would mention is when we did start the eviction prevention program, and this is still a very big part of what we do. Every Monday morning, Joe, Somerville District Court sends out letters to people saying, show up next week and tell us why you shouldn't be evicted from your apartment. We get that list of names and addresses. This is a long-standing arrangement with the court. And we send out a letter in 4 languages, English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Haitian Creole, saying, we know you heard from the court, don't give up. We might be able to help.
And don't ignore it.
And don't ignore it. You need to act fast. Get in touch with us now. And in 3 out of 4 cases, Cass is able to keep people living where they are living.
Have you seen that rise over the past 2 to 3 years?
The eviction prevention numbers?
Yeah.
There was a tiny little bit of a lull in December into January because, as you might have heard, some of these lenders were caught not doing their paperwork properly.
Right.
And they couldn't file foreclosure quite as much. But yes, we're seeing something like, well, it's between 7 to 10 eviction cases showing up each and every week at this point.
Now, do you help those who are renters as well as homeowners?
In different ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
And hopefully not at the same time of the same case to represent. We have, in fact, on staff last year, we did have a couple of lawyers that were able to go and support the efforts of the local courts in helping foreclosed situation, but also those who are running scared of being evicted.
Now, you were describing some of the other types of things, and we were talking a little bit about the fuel assistance program.
That's right. Normally, if you live in Somerville and you need help paying your heating bills, you have to go into Cambridge to apply because that's Cambridge city government operates fuel assistance for both areas. But we have such a good working relationship with them that people can come right here to Union Square to Cass's office and apply right here. And the same thing is true with things like food stamps and emergency cash assistance. We have the relationship with the Department of Transitional Assistance. If you call Cass and make an appointment, you can't just show up, right? But if you call and make an appointment, every week on Thursday, somebody is there from the DTA. Otherwise, people would be going out to Revere. People who are in such desperate straits.
Right. And we all know how easy public transportation is to get from Somerville to Revere.
Of course.
Yeah. You have to go to Worcester to get out there, I think, sometimes, but, you know. So we have an agency that is dedicated to not only folks who are in trouble, but it's dedicated to try to get folks to be financially self-sustaining.
Right.
You know, before they get in trouble.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, working with both individuals and families, the ultimate goal is economic mobility in no matter where we catch them. So if somebody is in need of being able to move up the ladder professionally and they need more education or to get, you know, a better job that will acknowledge their background and credentials or their language assistance, as a second language, all those kinds of things might help facilitate the progress of somebody in their economic mobility.
Housing, food, legal services, you name it. It's
Right.
there within CAS's basket of, we can help you and we can try to provide this service. So let's go back to, it always comes back to money. You get this chunk of money from the federal government that helps you provide these services.
Right.
Now we've got, for lack of a better term, my term, not theirs, a dogfight on Capitol Hill for those who want to maintain the existing programs, mainly social programs, and find cuts someplace else. And then you have some of our brethren who are running through the halls with machetes and basically saying, we're going to cut every social program that we can find.
Yeah.
So you folks may be at risk. The funding that you depend on may be at risk.
Right.
Talk to a little bit, the viewers may not know how that funding mechanism works and where it comes from and why it's so important
Right.
that fellow Somerville residents need this.
Yeah, I think, it just background that people appreciate that 47 years ago that Lyndon Johnson is the reason why we even have this particular area of a program federally and serving the nation. Community Service Block Grants was born out of the war on poverty. And at that time where unemployment was at more than 22% and there was a poverty numbers that were just sky high, this was an attempt to try and deal with that at that time. Over the decades, the numbers have decreased, and there has been a known effect of community action agencies, of which we have over 1,000 across the nation, who have in their communities at a local level, working with the states that they're in, provided the services that would allow people to continue to address those poverty needs. So in Somerville, we've done the same thing. Again, 30 years in the making here, that we have changed our service delivery only when the community has said these are the needs and have asked us to change. We do an assessment every 3 years. We look at a lot of things and ask people from the community what it is that they need. So our services are driven by the folks here in Somerville and what we hear day to day. And so we have argued for a long time that we've seen an impact of those services because they are what people want. They use them in abundance. We have people coming through the doors for a great number of services. And we have had trouble, I guess, having some of our brethren, as you call them, appreciate the appreciate the fact that there has been real known proof that we have and evidence that we have made some changes and made other folks' lives better.
And successes.
Exactly.
Right.
Many successes. And, people should appreciate, too, that this body of funding from the federal government requires us to look at outcomes. We have to make sure that we're measuring certain things.
They want to
We have
see your
report.
performance.
Right.
Right.
We are not just haphazardly providing these types of services with no accountability. So that is critical for people to understand, and that through that accountability, we also learn to tweak the
Sure.
provision of services.
What's working, what's not working.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I want to put a plug in here for the poll or survey that we're currently conducting of the community. If people who are watching tonight want to go online and go to the CAS website, which is www.caasomerville.org, and go over to the column called Latest News and Notes, there's a link where you can take the survey and say what you think are the most important needs that CAS and our fellow organizations should be addressing for the next 3 years. And that is part of how we stay accountable.
Yeah, terrific. We're going to put that for the folks who are watching tonight. If you need that web address again, we're going to put that on Greater Somerville's website as well. So we'll have the direct link back over to you folks. So there's a real need in Somerville. I mean, we've all watched what's happened globally nationally, statewide, and here in Somerville to the economy. What's the risk that we have as a community because of what's happening in Somerville now? You've got some billing it as a renaissance of the city, where we're constantly being compared to wealthier communities.
Right.
The Green Line will have a significant effect on this city. It will do one of two things. Either and these are my words, and I've said them on the air before, and I've said them in articles in the newspaper. It will either take us to heights that we've never known before, and we will become a model city who understand how to do these things when transportation of that magnitude comes through. We take care of our seniors, we take care of our poor, we take care of, to make it an affordable city and not let it run wild.
Right.
Or the Green Line will send us over the precipice, in that you will no longer have young couples who will be able to afford to buy here. You won't have seniors who will be able to stay here. And you won't have folks who aren't wealthy.
Right.
They will never be able to live here. They may be working in our city in the service industries, but they'll never be able to work here. The agency of CAS, I think, I've seen sometimes, gets involved in certain political things that take place in the city. Somebody asked me the other day, have you heard anybody who was in the ground floor of the Green Line? The advocates that were out there saying, we need public transportation, we need public transportation. Are they now singing a different tune because they understand what gentrification is going to do to the poor of this city? My response was, I don't think they're singing a different tune. I certainly think they're going to make a concerted effort to make sure that affordability is front and center when that comes through.
Yeah, and there are well-intentioned people as well as people who have, as you stated, been at the very beginning of all of this planning in organizations here in Somerville who are making sure that it's a constant reminder of what the needs are. And I have to say that the mayor's done a great job of inviting those kinds of comments and participation in the planning process, so it stays at the forefront of everyone's attention that this can't be let go.
Yep.
So.
But Joe, I think you have a really important point. Are we bringing the Green Line and other improvements in so that the people who live here will benefit from them, or so that other people will come in and benefit from them?
Dennis, it's a double-edged sword.
Right.
And organizations like ours can help the people who live here not only make it for now, but get job training, and skills and job readiness and that kind of thing. All we need is the money. We have the know-how.
Exactly.
So I'm going to make the pitch, because I don't want to put either of you on the hook, but I'm going to make the pitch to the people who watch this show that, you have a voice in this too. We have a congressman in Mike Capuano, and we have two senators that you can contact, Scott Brown and John Kerry, and you can contact them and you say, I watch Lynch's show, and they have these folks from the Community Action Agency of Somerville on there, and their funding may be in danger. So threaten them with a vote and tell them that their support of keeping the funding for this agency in play, and it's not just Somerville.
No.
These are agencies that are right across the nation. They do the work that a lot of city agencies, government agencies don't do.
Right.
I mean, the advocacy program for education for seniors. I mean, it's catastrophic when I look at what's happened to some of our seniors in this city.
Sad.
They want to stay home. They don't want to live in assisted living. They don't want to live in public housing. They want to stay in the home that they bought years ago. But it's becoming not really viable for them to do that. So it's not your issue, but I'm going to make the pitch again. So do me a favor. You all know how to contact Mike Capuano, John Kerry, and Scott Brown. Do it, and do it soon. Let's go back to the agency itself. What are the newer programs that you think you're going to have to be crafting going forward? I'm going to look at Dennis because he's the director of planning here. Well,
we work as a team, of course. Well, we had a kind of a test run of what programs we need when we had the stimulus funding over the
Sure.
last year and a half.
Yep.
So with that funding, we were able to add what we call case management, which means long-term work with people, not just in emergency crisis work. And we added a really innovative program called the Medical Legal Partnership, where CAS and Union Square Family Health,
Okay. Yeah.
a clinic here from the Cambridge Health Alliance, work together, because sometimes your health problem is really a housing problem.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a lead problem, it could be a mildew problem, it could be, and sometimes the best prescription is a lawyer or a social worker.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right. You got an absentee landlord who's not responding,
Right,
and it creates a health issue for the entire family.
definitely.
The other great partnership that we had last year was with SCALE, the Somerville Center for Adult Learning Experiences. We piloted a program in job readiness training. We were taking people who either were not in the workforce or barely in the workforce, maybe did not have that much experience with the expectations in the United States of the workforce, and help them figure out basic skills of interacting with people in the workforce, basic computer skills, and how do you search for a job. So these are things that were greatly successful for a short period of time, and that we would put back in a moment if we had the funding to do it.
Well, I would have to say that you folks are almost like doctors, because you have an emergency room and then you have your preventive care. So folks are coming into you during an emergency, asking for your assistance, and you've got programs that are also part of a preventive care thing in prepping people to take care of themselves. Admirable cause. You're always welcome back to talk about any special programs that you have.
Thank you, Joe.
But we're running out of time here, so my many thanks to Kimberly Smith-Cofield and Dennis Fischman from CAS for joining me tonight. As always, Somerville, stay safe and stay informed. Don't forget the Patriots Day, what am I trying to say?
The marathon.
Patriots Day Marathon. And don't forget to watch Paul Revere, Foss Park on Monday. Good night, everybody.
Good night.